Okay, thanks, Sandra. It's great to be back. This is Footloose number 3. Yeah, tonight we are very privileged to have Emma Storr with us. Emma trained as a doctor and has an MPhil in writing from the University of South Wales. Her poems have featured in several anthologies and poetry magazines, as well as winning local poetry prizes. Her debut pamphlet, Heart Murmur, was published by Calder Valley Press in 2019, and it has a medical theme based on her work as a GP. Her latest collection, Off Cumdens, is a collaborative work about Yorkshire with photos by Bob Hamilton. If you want to hear more about this book, there is a link on the event page for this evening. And this links to a radio interview Emma and Bob and I did for Chapel FM, their series Love the Words. I should also say that Off Cumdens has been nominated as a best collection in the Saboteur Awards. So if you buy it, if you like it, if you want to vote for it, voting is open until May 7th. As Andrew said, if you'd like to read along with either of tonight's poems, there is a link in the chat. However, I do recommend that you just close your eyes and listen as they're being read initially, and then perhaps look at the text when we go into more detail in our conversation. So the format is that I will read a poem and Emma will respond to it. I will try not to say anything while she responds. And then Emma will read a poem and it will be my turn to comment on her work. And then we talk about each other's work together. As I said, tonight, we may have the opportunity to present 2 pairings of poems, which means we may go a little beyond our 45-minute or usual 45-minute slot. I won't be offended if anyone wants to slope off before then, but we're not going to run over an hour, so just so you know what you're in for. I'm going to start with a poem from my debut pamphlet, A History of Walking. Most of the poems for Footloose I'm taking from this collection. Each of the poems in this book uses a different kind of walking as a sort of medium to explore themes of possession and loss and fear of loss. So we have promenades and protest marches, and in this case, we have a long distance hike. The poem I'm going to read is called Dale's Way. I came to the UK in 1977 and discovered, among many wonderful and weird things, these public footpaths, which we really don't have in the US where I'm from. We have massive long distance walks like the Appalachian Way, but the notion that you can just walk from one village to another, hopefully to a pub, through villages, through fields, was just magical to me. And I learned a lot about the English landscape and things like stiles and kissing gates, which Emma has something to say about, and things like nettles, which I had never come across. I've walked the Dales Way twice from Leeds to Windermere, and the first time was in the early days of marriage. And the poem explores newness in many different ways and accommodating differences, and that kind of unique companionship that comes of spending a long time walking with another person. Dale's Way. You understood landscape, could read its undulations, peaks and crevices as surely as you read my body. And I took pleasure in your knowledge. Day after day, we matched each other's stride. The rhythm of our boots resonated upwards until it was less like walking, more like riding a wide wave. We carried food a canvas tent, and the thing you called a water bottle, a canteen to me. But both agreed its contents had the metallic tang of blood. The miles rolled under our souls, Grassington, Buckton, Dent, Sedborough. And every morning we woke to a new Arcadia. You shaved at the edge of the back, craning your neck to a piece of metal propped in the crook of a branch. I found a drowned lamb, learned what nettles were, and dock leaves. Emma, over to you.
Well, I love this poem, partly because I've also walked bits of the Dale's Way, but it really spoke to me because it's a very tender poem. And I think you're addressing a lover and really linking the physical land and the body in a very sort of touching way, particularly at the beginning. So I thought the bit about understanding landscape and reading its undulations as surely as you read my body already sets up that sort of intimacy. And also, I think compatibility sexually as well as the companionship in the next stanza about day after day, we matched each other's stride, the rhythm of our boots. It's just very musical, actually. And the way, I mean, I guess not everybody can see the poem, but the way it's set out in tercets also adds to the musicality. And I thought that was very interesting. So it's very sort of fluid, and I could see you walking and the rhythm of the poem matching the walking. And I thought little hints like the canvas tent gave us the idea this was probably some time ago, because now you'd have a very lightweight synthetic thing, wouldn't you? So that was interesting. And then you mentioned newness and exploring somewhere you didn't know, coming over from America. I mean, I know that history about you, but I thought you did it very beautifully and succinctly to talk about the water bottle, which is a canteen to you. And later on, as you said, learning about nettles and then dock leaves to cure the pain. So I guess, I mean, you don't have dock leaves, do you, in the States?
Not as far as I know, but I'm no botanist. I mean, we have poison ivy.
Yes.
But nettles was a completely new and very surprising experience for me. And there may be listeners here who aren't really acquainted with the effects. I wonder if you could explain the relationship between nettles and dock leaves.
Well, nettles, when you brush against nettles, it gives you a fairly horrible sting. And as you'll get raised little blebs on your skin. And dock leaves, if you rub a dock leaf on a nettle sting, it is meant to relieve it. I've never been absolutely convinced. I'm not a botanist, so I haven't looked into the actual, physiology of that. I mean, I'm going through the poem sort of tercet by tercet, but do stop me. It was just the things that immediately struck me, I guess. I loved the assonance of the miles rolled under our souls. And then I'm a sucker for all these lovely names like Grassington, Buckton, Dent, Sedborough. There's something about the list of Yorkshire names that's very evocative. And then the fact that you woke to a new Arcadia. I sort of see you on this blissful walk in wonderful weather in a new relationship, and it's all going swimmingly. Except I found a drowned lamb. And I wasn't sure if that was meant to be very significant and slightly worrying that things could go wrong or things will go wrong, or whether, yes, I'd be really interested to know how that came in. But as I said, I love the bit about nettles and dock leaves too. So I think it's a very tender and very beautiful musical poem, and I really enjoyed reading it.
Thank you. Yeah, There are a couple of moments, and they're not loaded with any particular meaning, but the tang of blood in the from the metal, you know, the water from the metal canteen, and the drowned lamb. I think their function is to show that this isn't just fantasy, you know, that this is a reality.
Yeah.
And perhaps they hint at, you know, what lies ahead, or what could lie ahead for anyone.
Sure.
Yeah, the nettles and the cure were I mean, I knew I wanted to end with that.
Yes.
And it may well be that rubbing dock leaves is a distraction.
Yes.
You know, that it works. But, you know, if it works, it works. And that goes...
probably a big placebo response too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that, I mean, you've seen a few things in it that I hadn't seen, and you've seen things in it that I'm very pleased, you know, that you picked up on the rhythmic drive of it. Is important to me. And the place names, I mean, they're wonderful. I could have written a whole poem just based on Yorkshire place names.
Did it always come out as in tercets, these 3-line stanzas? Because the last one is actually 4 lines, and I wondered why you'd done that.
Because Anne Dockleaves is a postscript, you know, so it's, I mean, I could perhaps have had a blank line between the nettles and the dock leaves, but the 4 line at the end is to show that that's almost an afterthought, but it's thinking back about, you know, what's painful and what can ease that pain.
Yeah.
So in that sense, that it's an extra line. So I needed to show that in the form. And
when you first wrote it, did you write it in 3-line stanzas, or
probably not? I can't remember, but I mean, most of my poems start as, you know, 5 pages of solid scribbled writing, most of which is rubbish, and I go back and you know, whittle away at it until, you know, it's kind of a sculpting process rather than a putting down process. So with any luck, you know, a shape emerges.
Well, I thought that, as I've said, this shape actually suited it very well, and it certainly had a sort of momentum that reminded me of walking, the actual pace of walking. So I thought that was lovely.
Thank you. Would you like to introduce your poem?
Yes.
And perhaps say a bit about the book that it came from, which, for the benefit of those at home, I have my own copy here. You can get your own copy too. Off Cumdens, can you tell us what the title is?
So an off Cumden is a Yorkshire term for somebody not born in the county. And like you could be an incomer, but we're off Cumdens, because both Bob Hamilton, the photographer, and I were born in London, different parts of London, and have moved to Yorkshire and made Yorkshire our home. So that's why the book is called Off Cumdens. And it was really, well, Bob's here. It's a sort of 3-year project where of Bob's black and white photographs of Yorkshire landscape, people and streets. And when I met Bob a few years ago, I really liked these photographs. I still really like these photographs. And at some point I asked him if I could try writing a poem to accompany one of the photographs. And then it sort of developed over about 3 years. So sometimes I wrote a poem in response to a photograph, but as we developed more work together, then actually sometimes I'd written the poem first and asked Bob to find a photograph to match the poem. And sometimes we went on expeditions together, and the Kissing Gate was a photograph taken in Swaledale when we were staying in Keld, I think, for a couple of nights. So shall I read?
Before you start, can I ask you again, you know, I mentioned that with my Dale's Way poem, I was new to things like styles. Now, our Yorkshire landscape is crisscrossed with dry stone walls, dividing the fields into mostly long, narrow strips. And what is required is a way for walkers to cross the fields and animals not to. Yes. So there have been devised some very ingenious ways of doing this. And there's a whole vocabulary, and I'm not really up on it, but there are gap styles, there are ladder styles.
Squeeze styles.
Squeeze
styles.
Oh, squeeze. Yes.
Very narrow.
Yes.
Those styles. Yes.
Yeah. So can you explain what a kissing gate is like? And
okay.
How it works?
So a kissing gate is something that prevents stock getting through, but allows people to go through, because it's got a swinging bit between the fence so that you can walk through it, but you have to, it's on a hinge. I'm not explaining this terribly well, but it's got a sort of bit of metal like that, and then the gate bit swings through, but it doesn't lock. It works by, just not allowing something big enough, a big animal through, but humans can walk through, because
humans can only walk through one at a time. So
one at a time, absolutely.
A kind of C-shaped basic structure, stationary structure that you walk into, and you push the gate open and squeeze around it, and it shuts behind you. So the tradition is that if you're walking with someone else and someone you like, that you will kiss on either side of this gate.
But I looked up kissing gate, and because I always assumed it was to do with the romantic interpretation, but it's actually because it just kisses the edge of the curve. It's not, and doesn't lock.
Doesn't latch. Yes. Well, even better. Okay, let's hear the poem.
Okay. Your kissing gate. Your kissing gate is missing her other half. Curved arms hold damp air. She waits in rust and tufts of grass to be repaired, regain the swinging arc and kiss of metal lips, the tremble of the fence when walkers squeeze themselves against her bars and stop midway, honouring her moniker. Your other half is missing your kissing. And I think people can see the photograph, can they, in the chat? Or because the point is that this gate was broken. I mean, it's only half a gate, if that, and it's not connected to the fence. So it was desperately needing a bit of repair and love.
And if you can also see the shape of the poem in the chat. Now this is I'm sure, well, I shouldn't say I'm sure about anything, because Emma's not going to comment until I finish. It strikes me as intentionally a shape poem. This C shape, and this is where the gate that moves would be. But as well as being a shape poem, it's kind of toying with the idea of also being a specular poem. Now, for the poetry geeks out there, a specular poem is kind of a palindrome, but rather than a palindrome by letters, it's a palindrome by lines. So in this case, the first line of the poem is also the title, which is a fun way to get moving. So it goes, your kissing gait, and the first line beneath is missing her other half. So that gives us a very nice, I wouldn't say a Rorschach, but it is like a printed pattern. It mirrors from the middle of the poem on either side, because the poem ends, you're kissing, and the next line up is missing. So it is flirting with the idea of being a specular poem. And I use the word flirting intentionally because I think this is a wonderfully and very playfully erotic poem. We have the kissing of metal lips and the squeezing against bars, but what I really love is the tremble of the fence. And this occurs halfway through the central stanza, which feels to me like the heart of the poem. And it's also after this point when there's a human element that's introduced with when walkers squeeze themselves against her bars. But it's not until the next stanza, your other half is missing, that the poet addresses who is the you in the title, your kissing gait. So they're we've had a description of the gate, and she is personified as a she. But the playful change at the end of the poem from your kissing gait is missing her other half, your other half is missing, you're kissing, occurs in that change in the central stanza. To me, it feels like it sort of folds out at that point. I think there's something very understated and very contained in the image about incomplete lists, about a kind of brokenness, but not a desperately sad brokenness. It conveys a lot about absence. And I think it conveys something also about age in the rusting, the gate waiting in rust and tufts of grass to be repaired, which it just strikes me as such a light touch. You fit so much into 14 or 13 short lines, 14 if you count the title, I think. Yeah, I think it's a little gem.
Thank you, Lydia. And lots of things you pointed out, which I don't think I knew consciously. So that's really interesting. I mean, certainly the shape of it. I mean, it did have quite a lot of different, I can't now remember exactly what I did, but I mean,
think I've seen some earlier drafts.
Yes, it certainly had lots of drafts. But I'm glad you think it's erotic, and I'm glad you think it's got this sort of shape to it, which perhaps I hadn't quite taken on board.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
The mind does that.
Yeah. Well, it's good, because I think if you're too self-conscious, then it doesn't work in the writing, actually. But I mean, it's also, I don't know if this occurred to you, but it was also written during lockdown.
Yes, so that absence.
Yeah, so
there is something poignant.
Important sort of context for it. Although I hope it works without, it doesn't. It can work without knowing that it was actually written during lockdown when lots of people were separated. Yes,
yeah. Yes, I think that, there is that undercurrent of separation and incompleteness that, in contrast to the playfulness, I think makes it a much more powerful poem, that you have both. If it were one or the other, it would be a good poem, but it wouldn't have the power that combination gives it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So yeah, we're doing well with time. We have time to go to the moon, which is what we did promise in the blurb. So we probably won't have time for an extended discussion, but I'll read mine, Emma will read hers, and then if there's time, we'll have a little wrap up. So I knew from the start with the history of walking that I had to do something about walking on the moon. I didn't really know what. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the moon landing and to have been very excited by it, and the whole space race thing was it seemed a constant through my childhood. It wasn't until I discovered that Buzz Aldrin is on Twitter that I found the direction I wanted to take with my moon. And I can hardly recommend following him on Twitter. He's really something. I think he has 1.5 million, is that possible, followers? But I came across a tweet he'd written at the age of 88 that just said, "Good night, moon, hashtag still thinking about you." And I took that as sort of the starting point for this poem. It's called @Moonwalkers, and the @ is the commercial @ you get in Twitter. @Moonwalkers. We loved the way you all bounced gently across our screens and into our living rooms. We loved your little waves with your big mitts, your banter with Houston, the reassuring way you'd say, "Roger." We loved the names, Armstrong, Shepard. You were men we could depend on. But it was you, Buzz. You we loved the most because you seemed to be cool with parking the lunar module and being second man on the moon. Though that's gotta hurt. And frankly, you should have been first, and not just because your mom's name was Marion Moon. We loved how you said, "Magnificent desolation." 33 years later, that conspiracy theory guy prodded you with the Bible and called you liar. Twice you asked him to get away from you, twice before your haymaker landed on his jaw. Nobody saw that coming. Last week, 88 years old, you tweeted, "Good night, moon, hashtag still thinking about you." And we say, right back at you, Buzz, right back at you.
Thank you. It has to be in your voice because it's got so many, Americanisms in it. And it's lovely hearing you read it, because if I read it to myself, I don't get quite the same,
effect.
Frisson. So shall I talk a little bit about this one?
A word or two, and then let's move on to your moon poem.
Well, again, I love this. It's very playful. I think the repetition of "we loved" shows the sort of adoration you've got for Buzz. I like the sort of the American terms like "gotta hurt," "gotta" and "atcha." And haymaker, I understand it's the fist, a particularly strong punch, but I didn't know that expression here, and I wasn't sure if that was a more American vocabulary. And the little quotes like "Roger" or "magnificent desolation," it just sort of builds up the magic of it and the awe that you felt at the time, but also looking back now. So I thought it was very humorous and fun and playful, but also very respectful and reverent, actually, of both Buzz and of the moon. So, yes. And it's so satisfying when he does thump this guy on the jaw, isn't it? So,
it's actually on YouTube.
I'm glad he reacted like that. And
you can find it on YouTube.
Oh, can you? Go on. And he's still going strong. He's 92.
Oh gosh, yeah. There's also some wonderful footage of him standing behind Trump in one of Trump's speeches about, the new space race, and he's just standing there, sort of rolling his eyes. Yeah.
And also, I mean, it's sort of lovely to have the stereotype of an older person not managing social media actually being contradicted, and the fact he's tweeting. There he is, tweeting away.
Yes, that's true. And I did want some contrast in A History of Walking. I mean, I do address some very serious issues, and I mean, the serious issue here is living with being number two.
Sure.
And what that's like. But yeah, it is pretty much, as you say, just a bit of fun, but respectful fun.
Very respectful and very skillful, actually, because again, you get a lot of information and affection in there in actually quite a short space, I think. So I really, really enjoyed it. One of my favorites.
Would you like to introduce Mission?
Yes. Well, I don't know how to introduce it. I think I better just read it. I mean, this isn't, well, I can say it's an unpublished poem. It's been sent off to various competitions. I'm waiting to hear from one. And it's had a lot of different drafts, but this is, I think, what I'm going to leave it at. Mission. You live in London on the moon, 250,000 miles and months away down south. You call me when you trip and plunge in lunar seas of crises, craters fathoms deep. I offer light in seconds, hours, hope it finds your shadowed self in hiding. You ask me sometimes if my sky is overcast or filled with stars. I look outside. My northern nights are blacker, clearer. Constellations I can't name crowd the dark. I check the calendar for phases, the apogee and perigee of when we might meet. Then put on boots, a mask, and plot eccentric paths that lead across the empty space.
I think putting on the mask and boots at the end is masterful. You are a spacewalker. You are somebody in the times of COVID, a hiker. You're a friend. I mean, the moon, it's been a subject of poems for centuries, forever. But there's something in the enforced separation here between the friends or family, who the speaker and the subject, I should say, and the concern, the link with the pull of the moon and the different phases, and what that may be doing to the frame of mind of the person being addressed. This is the sense I get, is that, there's a precariousness going on here, and the speaker is trying to perhaps find patterns, reasons. It's trying to be supporting, but the link between the moon and frames of mind and states of being is ancient, and this is implied throughout. But I think that it's multiplied by, the opening line of distance in terms of space and time, and that London might as well be on the moon when you're not allowed to go see the people you want to see.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have I?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I hadn't thought so much about the moon affecting mood, to be honest, when I wrote it. I mean, that may be in there. It was more that the distance, as you said, that London feels like it could be on the moon, but also that when you look out of the window, you're seeing the moon, you know, you could both, if the person you're missing could be looking up at the same time and seeing the same sky. And there was something about that that interested me.
Well, it triangulates, you know, the people who are missing each other. Yeah.
Yes, and sort of checking the calendar to see when you could meet up would be, I mean, of course, this is also written during lockdown. So that certainly affected it. Although I have a feeling, I think that I wrote it in 2021. So
well, again, you know, it's a very light touch. It's not saying, oh, woe is me, you know, we're all separated, isn't it rubbish? You know, which is actually how we all felt. But you know, it just uses the vehicle of metaphor and very simple language. I mean, you use the sort of astronomical terms, but again, you achieve that sense of separation without any chest beating and you know, wringing of hands, and that's difficult to do. You know, that as a poet, we have to separate ourselves sort of from our subject. We can't just put it all out there on the page, because, you know, that would be a mess. You know, we need to present our difficult feelings in palatable ways. And I think, you know, you've done that beautifully here.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm allergic to sentimentality.
Well, that's a good thing to be allergic to as a poet, I think. Yeah.
So if that works, that's good.
Yeah. Well, as it happens, we've done very well for time. You could just a few things more about Off Cumdens, because it is a book of photographs with poems on facing pages. I don't know what I opened to there, Flamborough Head. And in our radio interview, because it was radio, I mean, this was really interesting that, you know, we couldn't show the pictures, but we talked about them. But I was at pains to make it clear that these are not sort of chocolate box pretty pictures of villages. You know, oh, look, there's Knaresborough and there's, you know, Ingleborough. They're very varied, and as you say, you're allergic to sentimentality. They are not a sort of a Yorkshire tea. I'm just saying it's in link. Yorkshire tea box illustration. Yeah, so we have, as promised, been to the Yorkshire Dales, and we've been to the moon. At this point, I will say a few things about the next Footloose, which is Malika Booker. She is the winner of the 2020, just gone, you know, that prize, forward prize for best single poem.
Prize, yes.
Yeah. As well as the founder of Malika's Kitchen, a cooperative, a writers cooperative. We will possibly be talking about hurricanes and walking across continents. And it will be on May 30th at 7 p.m. So I hope some of you here tonight or this afternoon, wherever you are, will come to that as well. So thank you very much, Emma. It's been a lot
Thank
of
you
fun.
for having me. I've really enjoyed it. And you explained a kissing gate much better than me.
Oh.
They work.
Well, it's a little mean to spring questions on people, but that's part of my job.
The mechanism.
Yes. Okay, I'll hand it back to Andrew now.
Thank you.
Okay, well, that's really fantastic. And once again, amazingly good timing. So everyone can go off and have their supper on time. But a big thank you to Emma for joining Lydia in the Footloose lounge. Thanks once again, Lydia and Emma.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Enjoyed myself.
Bye.
Bye.